done research in this space. You know, you can't read an HSI dissertation about HSIs without seeing a citation attributed to Excelencia in Education and their work. So please join me in welcoming Deborah Santiago. I took the cord with me.
I don't have a PowerPoint, so that's okay.
We're back.
Buenos dias. Good morning. No windows here, unfortunately, to get us going, but that's all right. You have some food, and we have an energizing day ahead of us. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Amanda. I think maybe I should collect that bio, maybe add that to what's on the website. I always find those things, you know, the work is always being. I always find it a little awkward to hear the bio as if, you know, like, I'm out to pasture, I finished doing it. You know, I feel like there's so much work and framing and opportunity to think about what these institutions are, but more importantly, what they can be, and how we can define what they are and create what's possible for the students we care about. That, to me, is a motivation in thinking about today and sharing a couple of comments. Hopefully we'll have time for some Q&A, but also this idea of what it takes to change traditionally white institutions that haven't paid attention, that weren't built for our communities, into ones that can help us reach the potential we all know we have within us in our community, while we give back as people of privilege because we have a college education. So thank you, Amanda. I also want to take a moment. I know I have some colleagues here, Jennifer Gomez-Chavez, our Vice President for Institutional Engagement, who's just a phenom helping things going, and I think Alejandra Camero is around as well. Okay, good. We put a team together because I think this conversation, working in partnership with the HSI Hub, but the work over the years has shown there's so many people doing good work. And, you know, I learned a long time ago working in DC, which is why it's great to get out of DC, that partnering with those of common cause is much more energizing. It's still hard work than just trying to convince people that we matter, that the issues are important, because those people that often have power and are focused on that, rarely do they change their minds. But there's so many good people already doing good work, organizing those of us who, you know, a las buenas y las malas, good, bad, and ugly, are finding ways to serve our community. In there is strength and power that I do think creates a kind of tipping point for effort. And the effort of this equity innovation hub and the work that we've been trying to do at Excelencia is trying to feed and inform and compel action in ways certainly bigger than any one of us, but in a way that can have a powerful impact, leveraging all of our strategies, efforts, commitments, strategies, learnings, failings, and opportunities. So what I'm going to share with you is a perspective about kind of where my thinking has been over this last journey. And I hope that it either resonates or you want to push back on these kinds of things, because I know every single one of you is thinking about these issues as well, whether having written to get this grant, or as you look to reflect what things could be improved at your institution. How do you make sure that we don't lose sight of who the students are and their strengths, and not just the needs that they have? To me, that's a critical framing. And we've tried over the last 19 years, actually next year will be 20 years of excellence in education. We started this organization because, you know, we'd be in public policy conversations in DC. And I will tell you, it's sad that in 2023, I could still be in a policy room and still be the only person of color in the room. 2023, it's crazy. But we'd have these conversations, again, 20 years ago, right? And we never talked about who the students were. Again, we were talking about student success back then, you know, completion, where we needed to go, the clarity of federal role and access, but more than that, we didn't talk about who the students were. And increasingly, like, the students are gonna look more and more like me and have my experience than the people who are making these decisions. How do we bring that voice, that experience, that perspective at that level? And part of what you do is so much good work is happening on the ground. You're so busy doing the work. The ability to bring awareness and attention to things that are happening for students of today doesn't make it up to that level. So we thought, how about if we try to translate that, be that, create that opportunity, that space, so that we don't have the, what I call, the profound ignorance. I say my job is ignorance abatement, right? Ignorance is not knowing. Stupidity you can't do a lot about, but ignorance you can. And I think we have to believe that. That's why you're all in education, right? We're all ignorance abatementers. Created that word. I don't know. No, but the idea here is, that we have to be out there talking about our students, our experiences, our strengths, the asset, and the opportunities. Because in DC, I know people throw money at crises, they invest in opportunities. And that means a reframing of our population and what's possible in an environment or space where, often we were talking about Latinos as English language learners, high school dropouts, and undocumented immigrants. And we are those things, but the majority of us are not those things. And in DC, power and the ability to get access to resources and others comes from the ability to articulate communities of power, right? Just like, look, Latino is a political construct, right? People of more than 20 countries of origin that have something in common and coming here. Maybe it's language, maybe it's not. In these days, you don't have to do that. But it was a construct created to create power and access to resources and space. And it's a construct that we're constantly redefining, right? Hispanic, Latino, Latinx, Latine, and other things, Chicanx, it's beautiful to hear because it's a community engaged in defining and redefining who we are. And that tension, that strength, that volatility is the space in which you all work, and the space that certainly in public policy we're trying to engage robustly. And that is hard for people that don't know us to understand. Everybody wants to put us in boxes, and then let's address that box. Often, let's put it in a box and let's put it over here. And we'll give them a little bit of money, a little bit of bread and water, care and feeding. The big work is here. And part of this work is how do we break that, say, no, we're not in a box. And no, we're not gonna take that little piece of pie. We want that piece of pie. I think that's the opportunity, and I love hearing all the CSUs and the effort of coming together, because that's the strength that we saw at Excelencia, and that we try to support however we can as a small organization, right? I think the other is that, there has to be this fundamental belief in higher education and the potential, not just of our community, but in higher ed. And that's hard in this environment space where we're questioning the value of higher education. Many of our students, I think, kind of appropriately are asking, is this what I need? Can I not just get a job? Can I not do things? That's real. I'll tell you that, fundamentally for us, we do believe that higher education can and must change to be more student-centered and focused. I say that because that's our framing, that's our values. And when things get hard, you don't tie to your values, what you believe in, you're not gonna be in it for the long haul. And make no mistake, this transformation of higher education, not just our institutions, but higher ed, to focus on our students and do well and right by our students, requires that we stay true to our values, even when it's hard. I say that to you because, we started Excelencia just a little bit journey, two Latinas who had this vision of what was possible, very different. My colleague Sarita, I love her to death, she's my sister in every way. We're quite different. I am a data nerd, I embrace that. We talk about being trilingual, speak Spanish, English, and data. I know data are the language of decision makers, but I know it's not just about data, right? My colleague is somebody who came to and through higher education, was an assistant graduate dean for years. She was a Chicana activist before a time when she was pushing UT to University of Texas, the flagship that said, you can do more, you must do more for Black and brown students. And they said, oh yeah? Well then why don't you come and show us? And she sure did. And that led to this kind of work. And I say that not with any manner of arrogance or ego, because this is hard and you have to be humble for the cause, but that it is possible if 1 to 2 people, like those of you in this room, have that value. And we were building on a public stage. We didn't have that approach. We were promised $1 million from a funder who reneged. We started Excelencia with a $16,000 contract, writing a little curriculum for elected officials to understand budgets. That was our first grant. And here we are now talking to all of you with efforts and strategies that I hope help the critical work that you're trying to do. Ooh, this moves. I have to be careful because I do talk with my hands and I get a little animated and I'm like, afuera, there we go. See what I'm saying? So, Amanda, I hear where you were because I just might have checked this out. That's all good. And yet we roll with it, right? Like so many of you have to do when you have great ideas and they don't come fully to fruition. So part of this idea, I know the topic is kind of institutional transformation and thinking about what it means to serve Latinx students and all students. I think the framing for us, as Amanda shared, at Excelencia we have an unapologetic Latino lens in our work. For us, that is not to the exclusion of anybody else. But that if we start with a young, fast-growing population and look at issues that seem intractable in different ways, can we not address them in a different way? Do we have the same hang-up? And I will tell you, a large part of our work is reframing issues to create space for action, right? Just like this idea and focus that, oh, well, if you're serving Hispanics, then you're not serving anybody else. Anybody ever heard that? Like, if you're an HSI, you're not serving, what? 75% of yours are others. They're totally missing the point. It's about including this population and looking at what serves them well. In actuality, you all know this, Latinos represent that post-traditional student. The majority of students, right? We often talk in public policy about traditional students going to traditional institutions and traditional pathways. Less than 18% of students in the country fit that profile. And yet, so much of what drives our thinking is that. So we said we need to reframe the way we think about it because Latinx students are indicative, of the majority of students. Stopping out, swirling, maybe going part-time, maybe not as college ready, working more than part-time to get to and through. How do we get policy decision makers to think about who the students are now? And is this not a great opportunity to focus on our population? Let us be the leaders. We are the leaders. When I started this work in Reauthorization of Higher Education Act in 1998, a long time ago, in a land far, far away, I worked with a lot of Latino advocacy organizations because we were trying to make the case at that time to move the developing HSI program, as Amanda was mentioning, into Title V for lots of reasons, political, good, bad, and ugly. And we did some research on Latino education advocates. And I still think there's a lot of work for us to bring attention to folks you all know now, Westminster, right? And the other cases that have been going on, Aspida and others. Lots of legal cases that showed Latino parents and families were actually education advocates. Serrano case about funding and opportunities. We never talk about our community as leading in education. Lots of families were involved in doing that. And just like so many of us overall, we're so busy doing the work. We're not out there tooting our horn, claiming all the credit, saying we're the experts, give us, just do everything that I say and do. We're so too busy doing the work with the students we care about. An additional dollar goes to the student, not to marketing or evaluation. We think about that because I think part of this effort that you all are in here, and what we've tried to find ways to support in our own way, is how to feed and inform a narrative that's not just asset based on students, but allows us to think about what is possible with the resources and things that we have. And I think, as Amanda mentioned, we've come up with this framework. This is not rocket science, and Excelencia didn't come up with it on our own. We've been listening and learning institutions for 20 years. And what we hear from your institutions is that, it is a combination of things. Despite what people think in DC and policy, there's a silver bullet that really isn't. But this idea of, can we show with our data where we are, where the gaps are, where the opportunities are to make sure our students are served well? Because if language are the data of decision makers, they don't see our students. They see numbers, they see the aggregate. How do we paint a picture that they can understand? And then how do we make sure that it doesn't stop with that data, but that we show what is possible, what can be done? So I appreciate, as Amanda was sharing, a lot of the research we've done, that I'm grateful, has informed some folks. It is gratifying. People come up and say, "You're all over my dissertation or work." I don't take that as any egotistical way. I think it's really that these are people that are committed. They're taking things next level, certainly way beyond what I've done. But that we have a community of common cause wherever we are to do it, and they're not stopping there. They're using it to make a case, to see what's actionable. That to me is inspiring for the kinds of work that we need to do. All right. So back to this institutional transformation work. You know, just as I mentioned, Latino is a political construct. You know that HSI is a political construct as well, right? Again, created, unlike our HBCUs and tribal colleges, either one with a mission to serve during a time of digital segregation or approved by a nation. Our definition is just based on enrollment. And then Title V eligibility has, you know, high enrollment need of needy and low education core expenditures. But that's it. There's no mission to serve. There's no commitment. And I will tell you, as a young whippersnapper at the Department of Ed, it first got funded in 1995. What we were going to do at the department, because we didn't know how to reach out to folks to let them know this grant was available, they were going to buy Haku's membership list for $50. I'm like, we are the U.S. Department of Education. Why are we paying $50 to buy a membership list for an organization? We should come up with it on. Let's go to NCS. And you know, you speak up, you have to do something about it, right? So create that list of HSIs. I'm like, this is not rocket science, people. We can do this. 28 years later, we're still coming up with the HSI list and helping educate others about it. But that led to journey to better understand what does it mean to really be intentional in serving. Because with a straight face, we talked to institutions that would tell me, yeah, we got this money and we don't have to do anything for Hispanics. And they're absolutely right. You do not have to do anything specific to improve student success by getting federal money as an HSI. Nothing requires it. And somehow that didn't sit well with me. That feels disingenuous, doesn't it? It just doesn't sit right. So we said that there is more. So we started, let's work with institutions that are doing something. I mean, with a straight face, you can sit and tell me, as a Latina, that you're not doing anything. Oh, okay. Well, you got some real, well, let's leave it at that. You got a lot going on there. So we started working with those who are doing the hard work, didn't have necessarily the resources and others. And this analogy, one of the institutions we work with is University of Texas El Paso. Have you heard of UTEP? For 31 years, they had a very powerful, impactful leader, Diana Natalicio, who passed away, unfortunately, 2 years ago. Our first brief was called Latino Student Success at HSIs, 2004. We started listening and learning to 6 institutions and their presidents and their students and others talk about how they define student success, what it was about. I will tell you, if you read it today, it still feels as salient today as it did when we wrote it almost 20 years ago. I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, frankly. But we have this conversation about how do you reframe and get people to take action. She, I think, to me, is the epitome of what it takes to really transform institutions, to hit their values and really fulfill the social contract we have with every student that chooses to enroll with us. And we'd have conversations like, what inspired her, was thinking, you know, and I'm grateful we're going to be writing, Sadith and I, a book about that, just capturing it. We started it with her, and I'm just so unfortunate that she's not with us anymore. But because that story isn't being told. And it is possible. I hope you all know that, you know, UTEP today is the only R1 open access HSI. It was an HSI before it became R1. All the other, there are 21 institutions that are R1. This is a Carnegie classification, being high in research. They were an HSI before they were an R1. All the others were R1s before they became HSIs. So the point of demography and geography is a big one in those places. Not here. When she started as president of UTEP, they were less than 50% Hispanic in a community that was over 85% Hispanic along the border. And she decided, instead of going out and recruiting from Dallas and Houston, all these other places, you know, El Paso is close to the mountains, close to New Mexico, pretty geographically isolated. Instead of trying to compete with the flagship university, she said, you know, we need to serve our community here. There are plenty of students here that need a quality education. Why do I have to go out and import? And when she came, there was a campaign called Harvard on the Border. UTEP was Harvard on the Border. She's like, well, I don't want to be Harvard on the border. I want to be the best UTEP we can be. I don't need to be the Harvard on the border. Already that's a framing. How do you own your community, what you are doing in your institution, and make it meaningful? So she said, you know what? We're going to take all that money, the travel and stuff, we're going to recruit from Paseo del Norte. We're going to recruit from this community because El Paso deserves a quality education, and we're going to make sure our service area and our institution reflects the community. That's a value-driven proposition. And that is certainly bucking the system and approach. Was not all that appreciated in the system in which she was working, per se, right? Where everything is about just going for more and more prestige. And we had this conversation, oh no, yeah, okay. I get going on this, I don't mean, but has anybody seen the movie Moneyball? Okay, good. You have some baseball fans or just Brad Pitt fans? Both? Does anybody remember what the thread or the theme of Moneyball is, or basic principle is of Moneyball?
Get on base.
What's that? Stats? Oh, okay, yeah. Stats, yes, but you know that absolutely. But not just that. This idea. So the movie is based on a book called The Art of Winning an Unfair Game, Michael Lewis, 2003. It's worth, you know, in your quiet moments, if and when you have them at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, to take a look at the actual book, because, you know, the idea of the art of winning an unfair game feels like a lot of what we do day in and day out. The idea that kind of conventional wisdom doesn't always hold, especially for our population, right? I remember talking to students, we did a lot of focus groups early on, where, you know, the conventional wisdom of choosing an institution is based on financial aid, academic programs, and prestige, right? When we talked to a lot of Latino students, they'd say to us, their choices were made by cost, access, and location. So here are institutions, recruiters, and all stuff, focusing on, you know, financial aid, prestige, academic programs, and students are making choices based on cost. Imagine just the difference in mindset and problem solving and programming and supporting students. If you think they're making choices based on financial aid, the presumption is that they know financial aid, they've applied for financial aid, and they can understand the differences of what is going on there. This is not to insult any student. This is just that you're starting from a false premise. And you continue down that road. Is there any surprise you're not serving these students effectively? And then you blame the students for not approaching conventional wisdom and doing it the way understood. That's what we see a lot of in policy and strategy. So this Moneyball idea is one that conventional wisdom isn't always right. In fact, rarely is it. And that you need to be very evidence-based. Somebody said stats, okay, I'm all for that. Analytical, evidence-based, sabermetric in your approaches and strategies, and how to do that with less money. So for those of you that know the movie, I mean, you know, getting the highest player, lots of say, but they were not as effective. He built a team that didn't have all the shiny bells and whistles, but that could find ways to work together. And had a very different impact for a much lower budget for what it was. Now, I'm not saying money doesn't matter and we shouldn't have money, but the reality is where we are, is that it's not just about that. How do we engage and serve our students? How do we think differently with the strengths of who our students are and find ways to rethink what we can do in higher ed? That is very easy to say up here in a microphone and a podium. It's much harder to do when you're in the space dealing with regulatory constraints, staffing challenges or issues, micromanaging leaders, or ignorant to who our population is, or really just don't care. Right? I know. That sucks. And part of it is we have to own that the space we live in is not perfect, and the work that we're trying to do is not as clean and clear as what's black and white and on paper and in a book or anything of that nature. And yet, the fact that you all persist, that you're looking at equity and innovation, that you're looking at how do we define what it means to be an HSI, to intentionally serve the students we have, not the ones we want or thought we had or would prefer, right? How many institutions do we know where students do well despite the institution instead of because of the institution? To me, that's the difference in the work we do. I was shocked when we get some institutions like that are interested in being part of our network and engaging, very selective institutions. I'm like, you don't need Excellencia, you don't need this kind of work we're doing. You're so decentralized, and you select out for any issues of equity. These students are going to do fine wherever they go, and good on you, good on those students. This is not criticism of them, but the real work, the innovation, the change is happening in institutions like yours. And part of our commitment is to bring attention to that and a framing for folks that continue to want to believe there's a silver bullet, continue to want to believe that there is an answer, that if we just fix this one thing, we get the right people or something, that it's all going to be great. It's all going to work out. And if not, it's our fault. Oh, chili winning. So part of why I'm raising these things is it's early morning. I know you had a long day yesterday, a lot of good conversations. I know you're going to have some more today. But I hope thinking about what we can do in these challenging moments when we're tired and feels like we're not getting the support and the resources to do the things that we care about. The reason many of you are here is because of the students. I mean, if you were here to get money, to be rich, you're in the, sorry, wrong place. And if you were doing this work to be universally loved, also, sorry, that's not going to happen either, right? But you are folks who are committed to cause, whatever it is. We don't have to agree on that, on what it is that's the solution. But this is that space and place where you are with peers who have that same commitment to cause. It might look different. Maybe their focus is not being a data nerd. Maybe it's in some other ways, and that's absolutely fine. Because while we're not approaching it the same way, what connects us is that common cause, something more than ourselves, to our students, to thinking about what's possible, to taking a chance. Excellencia, we took a chance. We gave ourselves a year. Let's see if it works. If it doesn't work, we can go back and get JOBs. We can still find ways to contribute. We couldn't find an agenda and a space to do it, so we created it. Okay, that's arrogant maybe, but you know what? It's because we believe in the community, what's possible. Had to reject the framing of our community in a very deficit way, the belief that we were the problem, that nobody knew what to do, that it wasn't happening. Doors closed. All that's bullshit, right? It's just not true. And part of Moneyball and this idea, and the reason I imagine you all are here, is that you do believe that more can be done, and you all have been working so hard. So I don't want to minimize that as I give some examples of what I think the framing for consideration. Not a framing. We have frames up and down, on every wall. There's framework for everything, right? But what motivates us and guides us when things get challenging or when there are great opportunities you jump through? I think to me that's part of what keeps us going when things get challenging, but also when there are opportunities. And in any, just like the challenge of the pandemic, in every chaos is opportunity for us to rethink, to make sure we center students. And that rests with all of us in this room, not somebody else. And as we started Excellencia, good, bad, or ugly, the idea was that we can lead. We must lead, not wait for somebody else. And while it's so easy to be reactive to just barrages and just, not buckets, but like trainloads full of stuff that are very deficit and not supportive and counter to people because they have an education, a college education, they think they know what higher education is. The ability to have the stamina, the commitment, the engagement to figure out, no, we can do it differently. We must do it differently. Let's take that Moneyball approach and say, how do we show a level of efficiency and effectiveness that is student-centered, right? No, I just showed my economic bent. All right, being efficient and effective. And I always say, education is a human enterprise. What's efficient isn't always effective. We know that. And when, that is very big in our conversations in policy where we think about wanting to be efficient. at the expense of what's effective. How do we frame these conversations? How do we compel? How do we stay motivated? How do we give ourselves grace in this time and effort while we're trying to give it to students? And keep our eye on the prize when it gets challenging and hard. And it's never been easy. And we were just doing some policy forum. I'm grateful to some of the folks here in California met with us. We've both been meeting with folks in Texas and in New York. And we're having more one-on-ones and smaller groups in Florida and Illinois. Challenges have always been high. Doing this work has never been easy, unfortunately. But the power of the folks in this room and the resources and investment from HSI Hub, the partnership with Excelencia, I think part of it is knowing that we are not alone in that. Maybe sometimes you need to take a step back, and maybe you need to double down. But finding that inspiration and seeing what's possible is big. When you hear people say we can't do it, or we don't know what's happening, or not enough Latinos are graduating in the fields that we want to recruit, we spend time trying to call that out, right? We've got examples of Excelencia. You want to know what's working in Arkansas and New York and other places? There's evidence-based practice across the country, people doing work. Sometimes strapping it to their back and making it happen out of malas, right? But there's no excuse for inaction. Can't tolerate that part of it because people are doing it. And so we need to bring attention to them. And we need to say, this is what's possible, and bring it to the decision makers that have resources or opportunity. So that's one, right? Making the case with data are an important, just to create space for action. I would encourage you to not let that go. Don't let data be used to penalize you, but to frame the opportunity to invest in something more. Not enough of us do that. Talk about what's our impact analysis. If we do this, we're gonna get that. We just say we need this. The ability to nuance that. Some of you did that in your proposals and efforts, thinking about how to frame or reframe your thinking. That's so powerful, and not enough of us do that in a meaningful way. That engages and compels. And then, not letting ourselves be limited to this framing that's us versus them. To me, that's humongous. I work in DC. Every single time we go through reauthorization, they're wanting to pit black versus brown. HSI versus HBCU. The HSIs and everybody else. It's just the perpetual us versus them. Oh, there are these marginalized communities. We're not marginalized, we're the majority. You put black, brown together, we are the majority. But we're very busy trying to figure out how to frame issues, and we let others frame for us. We are never gonna win, whatever win means, in a space where we don't claim. This is why I appreciate the HSI construct. I have a love-hate with that construct overall. What I love about it is that we as a community get to define it, not limited to what's in federal legislation alone. And you all who've chosen to participate in this work with the Hub, those of you that are affiliates with Excelencia, you've chosen even harder path because you're wanting to bring the voice to make this different, to be more what you believe is possible, what you see with your students and others. That has to be respected, it has to be heard. Doesn't mean we have to universally agree on it, but that is the leadership enterprise that we see in rooms like this with people like you've taken the time. So I want to thank you for taking that time. It is not an easy road, and we're not done. I wish I could say this is set in stone, and ya pa'lante, okay, now we're gonna get this bucket of money because we figured it all out. I think what motivates us is that it's not just about us, right? It is about these students. We have ours. I was raised to believe, to whom much is given, much is expected. We have a college education. We are able, despite the odds. How do we make that for others and create that space? And you all know the trials and travails that you came in. It was not easy. Can we make that just a little bit easier for others? Can we change the system and the structure? The only reason we have to believe that is possible. And sometimes it feels like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or 2 steps back and half a step forward. So last thing I'll say is that, we are in it for the long haul. I imagine you all are in it too. This is not for everyone. But I do think that making sure that we transform institutions that are more intentional serving, knowing who you're serving, who you're not serving, who you can serve, Then it's a matter of calling out, are you doing so or not? That's why we created Seal of Excelencia, right? Not perfect, but we went from 189 institutions in 1994 to 571, the list we just released. That is a big growth. And people who crassly say, eventually every institution is going to be an HSI. Well, from their lips. But it's not about the enrollment number, right? It really is about that intentionality in serving. We work with institutions 60% Latino. We're not doing a darn thing differently. Students have to change to meet the needs of these institutions. And then we see institutions that are 18%. Here, we've got a colleague from Michigan, 9% Latino. With a great deal of intentionality. They are committed, they are serving these students, they're not perfect. None of us are, that's not the goal. Never let the perfect be the enemy of good. But they are finding ways to show that commitment and effort. And the Seal of Excellence, we had an institution in South Texas, 92% Latino, did not earn the Seal of Excellence. Because it's not just about demographics. You better tell me a story. How are you doing it with data practice and leadership? And for us, it's not because we decide that. There is an institutional assessment. There's a way of checking your own story. Whatever it is, that tells you where the intentionality is. And if you're willing to consider where are our strengths, where are areas that we can improve, not where we're failing, but areas where we can improve. How do we bring attention to that? How do we tell that story and leverage it for resource and opportunity? That's the opportunity for all of us. So I guess with that, I might have some, my thing stopped, okay. Well, sorry about that, guys. But let's not let the leadership just stay in this room, and the work and the commitment that you bring, the motivation that got you up early to get through traffic to get here, be what limits what's possible. Know that you're not alone. You've got folks in this room, you've got folks in DC, you've got folks all over. The story is ours to tell, the ability to define it is ours to own. I look forward to hearing and engaging with you all as you educate us, but as you move forward in making sure you're making a difference for our students every day. Thank you.
I cannot let this amazing woman leave the room without showing her some love and appreciation, right? She was trying to run off the stage. No. So we do look like twinsies. We did not plan this, but we are a little matchy today. But I do want to just take a quick moment. Partner in this work. To do this work in common cause with Sarita Brown, who's not here today, unfortunately, who is also co-founder of Excelencia in Education, and Deborah Santiago, who absolutely believe in all of the work that we're trying to do and the students we're trying to serve, and have been at this for decades, trying to amplify and tell our story authentically to the folks who are making decisions about the resources that come to our institutions. And with that, I just want to say, I appreciate you so much. I appreciate you and Sarita. I appreciate Excelencia in Education, and we are so proud to have you as our core partner of this work and be on this journey with you. And I'm going to give you this beautiful appreciation that actually says, you're one of our equity innovation collaborators. But I'm going to tell you a little bit, and I've been saying this throughout the convening because, again, I really think we need to model what we say. We took great care to contract with an LA-based business, a CSU alum, Chicano-owned small business, who designed our appreciation award for today. And you should know that this award, the wood base, is sourced from fallen trees in North Hollywood. And the artist chose this wood because of its beauty and its geographical proximity to CSUN. And I want to share in his own words what this opportunity meant and the life that he sort of gave this award. And he says, in his own words, when a tree comes down in LA County, our work is to retain the worth both of the wood and the spirit of a living part of our city. So with that, I want to say, this is the way.